Welcome to the Wild West, folks, or at least a version of it you won't find on any postcards. Forget the romantic notions of saloons and showdowns. We're diving headfirst into the muck and mire of frontier justice. Today we're cracking open the history books and reliving the most savage punishments the Wild West had to offer. So saddle up, partners, and get ready for a gritty, unflinching look at the dark side of the frontier. You know the old saying, give 'em enough rope. Well, in the Wild West they took that literally. Hangin was the go-to punishment for serious offenses, and I'm talking murder, robbery, treason. They'd use whatever they had on hand, a sturdy tree, a beam in a barn, heck, sometimes even a telegraph pole. More often than not, the condemned was left to dangle and slowly suffocate, their feet twitching for what seemed like an eternity. Take the case of Black Bart, the notorious stagecoach robber. His punishment? A one-way ticket to the end of a rope. From boom towns to ghost towns, countless souls met their end at the end of a noose. It was a brutal reality of frontier justice, a stark symbol of the law's power, or at least the power of the men who enforced it. Let's get one thing straight, flogging ain't for the faint of heart. This punishment was pure, unadulterated pain, designed to humiliate and punish in equal measure. Imagine being stripped bare, your hands bound, and then whipped mercilessly with a leather strap, a cat-o'-nine-tails, or even a hickory switch. Folks could get lashed for all sorts of offenses, stealing, gambling, even public drunkenness. One story tells of a gambler caught cheating at cards. His punishment, 20 lashes on his bare back. The man was never quite the same after that, both physically and mentally scarred by the ordeal. Flogging was a brutal reminder that in the Wild West, stepping out of line could cost you more than just your pride. In the Wild West, your reputation was everything, and nothing could tarnish a reputation faster than a brand. This was human branding, a punishment designed to mark a person for life, literally. They'd heat a metal iron red-hot over a fire till it glowed with a fearsome intensity, and then, imagine walking around with the letter T seared into your hand for thief, or C for counterfeiter. Take the story of a young man caught stealing horses. He was branded on his cheek with the letter H, horse thief. The brand effectively ended his life as he knew it. No one would hire him, no decent woman would court him. Branding was a brutal practice, a permanent reminder of the consequences of breaking the law in the Wild West. Now here's a punishment that's about as messy as it is humiliating. Tarring and feathering wasn't about killing a person, though it probably felt like it at the time. Imagine this. You're dragged out of your home, stripped down to your skivvies, and then covered head to toe in boiling hot tar. While the tar is still sticky and scalding, they dump buckets of feathers over you. This punishment was usually reserved for folks who'd committed crimes against the community, like betraying a neighbor or speaking out against authority. One account tells of a tax collector who'd been a little too enthusiastic in his duties. The townspeople, fed up with his greed, decided to give him a little makeover. They tarred and feathered him, paraded him through the streets on a rail, and then ran him out of town. Tarring and feathering was a cruel and unusual punishment, but in the Wild West, it was a potent symbol of the community's power to punish those who dared to cross them. They say time heals all wounds, but I bet that's cold comfort when you're stuck in the stocks with a crowd of people jeering at you. This punishment was all about public humiliation, about making an example of folks who broke the law. The stocks themselves were simple contraptions, wooden frames with holes for your hands and feet. You'd be locked in place, unable to move, at the mercy of the good folks of the town. Sometimes they'd pelt you with rotten fruit, vegetables, or whatever else they could get their hands on. One story tells of a man who got caught stealing a loaf of bread. He was sentenced to a day in the stocks, where he endured the ridicule of the townspeople. The stocks were a powerful tool for maintaining order in the Wild West, a stark reminder that even minor infractions could have very public consequences. Now, if you thought the stocks were bad, let me introduce you to their cousin, the pillory. This contraption was similar, but instead of your hands and feet, it was your head and hands that got locked in place. Imagine standing there, exposed to the elements, with your head stuck in a wooden vise. You were completely at the mercy of the crowd, a captive audience to their every jeer and insult. Like the stocks, the pillory was all about public humiliation. One account tells of a woman accused of gossiping and spreading rumors. She was sentenced to a day in the pillory, where she was subjected to a barrage of insults, rotten fruit, and even chamber pots emptied from windows above. The pillory may seem like a relic of a bygone era, but it serves as a stark reminder of the power of public humiliation, and the lengths to which people would go to maintain order in the Wild West. The whipping post, a simple but effective tool of punishment that's been around for centuries. In the Wild West, it was a common sight, a stark reminder that justice was often swift and brutal. We're talking about a brutal beating, administered with a heavy whip, a cat-o'-nine-tails, or even a length of barbed wire. Each lash drew blood, leaving the victim's back a mangled mess of welts and scars. One account tells of a young cowboy who got caught cheating at cards. He was sentenced to 20 lashes at the whipping post. The punishment was brutal, the pain excruciating, but it was the humiliation that stayed with him long after the welts had healed. The whipping post may be a thing of the past, but it serves as a reminder of a time when justice was often brutal and unforgiving. Ever heard the phrase waterboarding? Well, the ducking stool was kind of like the Wild West's version of that, but with a whole lot less subtlety. Picture this. A wooden chair, perched precariously on the end of a long lever, positioned over a body of water. A river, a pond, sometimes even just a muddy ditch. The accused would be strapped into the chair, their hands bound, their fate literally hanging in the balance. And then, splash, down they go, plunged into the icy depths. One story tells of a woman accused of being a scold. Her neighbors, fed up with her sharp tongue, decided to take matters into their own hands. They strapped her into the ducking stool and gave her a thorough soaking. The ducking stool might be a relic of the past, but it stands as a chilling reminder of the ways in which women were controlled and punished for daring to step outside of societal expectations. Ever bitten your tongue to avoid saying something you might regret? Well, in the Wild West, they took that idea to a whole new level with the Brank, also known as the Scold's Bridle. This contraption was designed to silence those who dared to speak out of turn, and let me tell you, it wasn't pretty. Imagine a metal cage complete with a spiked plate that fits snugly over your head. The plate would be inserted into your mouth, pressing down on your tongue, making it impossible to speak. Sometimes the plate would even be spiked, adding a whole new level of pain to the equation. There are stories of women forced to wear the Brank for days on end, their tongues raw and bleeding, their spirits broken. The Brank may be a relic of the past, but it serves as a stark reminder of the lengths to which people would go to control women's voices and silence dissent. Now let's talk about a punishment that's a little less medieval torture device and a little more walk of shame. The drunkard's cloak, also known as the barrel shirt, was the Wild West's way of dealing with public intoxication, and it was all about humiliation and deterrence. Imagine this. You wake up after a night of overindulging in a bit too much firewater, your head pounding, your mouth drier than a desert. But instead of a hangover, you're greeted by the sight of a wooden barrel with armholes cut into the sides. You'd be forced to wear this contraption, which often had a sign proclaiming your crime for all to see. One account tells of a regular at the local saloon who was known for his prodigious thirst. After one too many, he found himself on the wrong side of the law, sporting the drunkard's cloak. The drunkard's cloak might seem like a humorous anecdote today, but it reflects a time when public shaming was a common form of punishment, and communities took a more direct approach to dealing with those who disrupted the peace. Well, folks, there you have it, a glimpse into the brutal punishments of the Wild West. These weren't isolated incidents, they were a part of the fabric of life on the frontier. Join us next time, as we continue to explore the fascinating and often brutal history of our past. Until then, keep your noses clean, your mouths shut, unless you want to try the Brank, and stay away from the ducking stool.